The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Shawn, Marketing Manager for the Electronic Security Association, and we'd like to thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping notes to go over. All callers will be muted for the duration of this webinar, so please be sure to use your question log to submit questions, and all questions will be addressed at the very end of the webinar. Additionally, a recording of this webinar and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation will be available in the members-only resource library on esaweb.org. Today's Day on Capitol Hill pre-conference webinar is sponsored by Telguard and Triad Distribution. Representing Triad, we have Lynette Baranowski, Director of Marketing and Communications, on the line, and we'd like to invite Lynette to say a few words.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lynette. I'm Director of Marketing at Triad. Triad is North America's largest independent security distributor. We are happy to support the security industry and governmental affairs. We know there's a tremendous amount of work that the ESA does, and we appreciate their efforts and are proud to sponsor events such as the Day on Capitol Hill.
Thanks so much, Lynette. Now I'd like to introduce everyone to Lynn Comer. She is the chair of the ESA Government Relations Committee.
Thank you, Jacqueline. We really appreciate the generosity of our sponsors. One of the key priorities of the Electronic Security Association's Government Relations Program is to provide an opportunity for industry professionals to meet face-to-face with U.S. House and Senate members and their staff on issues impacting the business operations of the membership. So when we travel to Washington, D.C. next week for our 8th annual Day on Capitol Hill, we want you to be prepared with valuable insight into the issues we will be discussing, and we want you to feel comfortable and informed when it comes to your meeting. Today's issue briefing will be conducted by John Schwartz, ESA Director of Government Relations. The Electronic Security Association has a very experienced and dedicated Director of Government Relations who has over 42 years of Capitol Hill experience. He has represented many trade associations after serving in top positions in Congress, including a government relations consultant for the Security Industry Association, the Associated Locksmiths of America, the Door and Hardware Institute, Design Build Institute of America, and many others. John Schwartz has a law degree from American University, a master's in American government from Georgetown University, and a BA in political science from LIU. I've worked many years with John in my capacity as chair of the Electronic Security Association's Government Relations Committee, and I have not seen anyone more organized and more involved or more attentive to our business needs than John. He's the head of his own consulting company. John uses his experience and knowledge of the legislative system to help ESA at the state and federal level. He has made our day in Washington, D.C. a success each and every year. John?
Thank you, Lynn, very much. I appreciate it. I also want to thank the Electronic Security Association, Merlin Guilbeault, and President John Knox for permitting me to undertake this webinar today. We're going to start out with a little bit of an introduction. The environment upon which the attendees will be coming to Washington next Monday. The Congress will be coming off a Passover Easter recess. Now, the Congress has a lot of recesses similar to kindergarten. They have a lot of days that they take off. The last 2 or 3 weeks they've been in the district. They've been listening to their constituents. The amount of time that they have left in their session because of the election, which is 28 weeks from today, is not that much from a legislative point of view. Therefore, on the Monday that we have started to have all of you come in, especially on Tuesday, it is a very hectic and a very pressurized period for the members in the House and the Senate and their staff. They have other periods where they take recesses and time off. in May for Memorial Day and July 4th, the whole month of August. So basically there's not a lot of time left to do legislative work. But for all of them, they're interested in their constituents because this is an election year. Some of these members of Congress are not running for re-election. They've announced that they're retiring. Some of them are in very tough primary battles in their district or in their state. Primaries usually are between now and the July period. Some are in September. So the environment upon which our attendees are coming in this year as opposed to last year is very pressured and very hectic. But for us, it'll be a very good experience. The next point that I wanted to bring up on the purpose for the Day on Capitol Hill, initiated, as Lynn said, 8 years ago, the main purpose is to introduce the industry, your business, your family, your customers, your connections, and the kind of products that you service and integrate to the members of Congress, and especially to these young staff people who advise these congressmen and these senators. As you know from those of you who have been here before, that a lot of staff people are in their 20s and 30s, mostly in their 20s. They're right out of college, or they've been up on Capitol Hill 2, 3, or 4 years. The average time that a staffer spends in Congress now is about 4.5 to 5.5 years, and they go on to other pursuits. So these young people have a lot of responsibility, but they advise the congressman on not only issues, but who's come into the office. So the staff is very much important. I will reemphasize this fact for the attendees when they arrive on the 28th and we have our briefings, as well as the morning of the visitations. The staff that we'll be meeting with has jurisdiction control over certain subject area. They're very territorial in Senate and House offices in the Congress. As you may know, there are 435 House members, each with a staff of about 20, both in the district, mostly in Washington. And of course, there are 100 senators. The staffs there range between 30 and 40, and there are committees and subcommittees. There are approximately, I didn't count all of them, but the last time my staff did the research, is about 2,100 staff people in the House and the Senate. And I don't expect you're going to see 2,100 people, but as Lynn and the leadership in ESA knows, our presentations to Congress on the industry and who we are and what we're concerned about, we have reached upwards between 150 to 200 of the staffs and the members, which is a very small percentage, by the way, of the total number of people that are here. So there are 535 elected officials, approximately 2,100 members, and you'll only be seeing a very small number of those based on your member and your delegations. Now the congressmen and the staff people, especially the staff during this period, again are under pressure, and they're working very hard in different areas. I always joke when we have attendees that in each office they have a clock, and the clock has certain buzzers, and the buzzers signify the voting in the House and Senate. So there may be 2 buzzers that go off, or little chimes that go off, and so there's it's very hectic. People are coming and going, people are voting, and so the context in which we're going to be talking about some of these issues, while they are important to us and they're important to the industry, their attention span runs maybe 2 to 5 minutes. So again, on the context, you need to bring with you, and you know, in business it's always important to bring a business card that identifies yourself and your business and your address. You need to put into context who you represent, not just the Electronic Security Association, but hopefully as a member of a chapter or an organization back in the district. It could be even the U.S. Chamber or the active representation you have in the district. And who you represent is not just yourself. You need to articulate and go very slowly and say, we have a family, we have a business, we have customers, and we service very important residential or commercial, if you do, markets in your district. These are all very important signals to make to these staff people and to these members and senators because this is an election year and because it is so contentious between Republicans and Democrats. It takes just a few votes one way or another to swing elections. They are going to listen, and they are going to hopefully take notes and follow through on what we want. Now, I have a line here. It says, what do you want, presenting your issues? Every congressman and every senator and staff person, just like in a little city or in your own city back home, they have different attitudes about people that come into their office. Some come in and want a specific amendment or a specific bill, and we have those. Some come into an office and just want to introduce themselves, which is fine because that adds to their networking information, and that's good for the member in his reelection. And some come in and do not know how to articulate what it is they want, whether they want assistance for a grant or they want funding for a particular system. But in some cases, when we go over this in the next couple of minutes, we have specific issues that we want to put into context for the staff people and for the members as to what we do want. Now, when we present these issues, we have dozens of issues that we monitor and report to the Electronic Security Association. We are very active on a national level with many of the associate members and many of our allies, including ADT and Tyco and Interlogic and Honeywell and ADI. I mean, just a whole host of corporations and associations and coalitions. If I really wanted to, we could be in each office for about 4 hours. But unfortunately, you don't have the time to do that. So we've selected some of our key issues, and these are the issues that we suggest. Of course, if you want to talk to the staff person or the member about any issue that concerns you, time is your enemy. So we need to keep it kind of within a certain time frame. And if someone wants to ask a question later on, I can embellish on that. The last point, I think, is the most important for me, because after all of you get on your plane and your train and your car and you leave this wonderful city where I was born, I'm left here. And I have to follow up with these young staff people and the members in the House and Senate. And follow-up is very important. We have found in the last 7 or 8 times that we have done this, there were specific requests that we have made to the various congressmen and various Senate staffs on 1 or 2 of our key issues, which has not been fulfilled. So in politics, as in life, congressmen and senators, and especially staff, they'll make you feel good. They'll say anything to make you happy. And as you leave, they'll end up in the evening talking to the congressman or senator, making their own decisions as to what is a priority or what is not. These are important issues for us, and we would like you to leave a card behind and to follow up with these folks when they come back to the district. Some are run elections, some are not, but to hold them to their commitments and also to network and make friends with these elected officials. Next slide. We have undertaken a joint cooperative issue with our friends at the Security Industry Association. We work closely with Don Erickson, his lawyers Jake Parker and Elizabeth Hunger, and all of the SIA members on an issue that's of top priority for them as well, and that's school security. I'm not going to sit here in this webinar to go over the national issues that have come up on this, but school security and providing schools with security equipment and security services is become a very, very important issue nationwide. And the Congress has undertaken several action items last year that relate to the funding for elementary and secondary schools, which all of you know or should know are funded at the school district level, at the local level, and in some cases receive state funding as well. So one of the key ways that Congress allocates money to school districts and therefore to individual schools, not private but public schools, is through a formula state grant program. This has been going on for years. There are top priorities at the Education Department and in other federal departments in which school districts receive federal funding in this manner. They're allocated by different formulas based on different criteria, and they are dispensed usually to the state and then to the individual school districts for not competition, but for implementation. So in the last year that Congress looked at the entire federal budget, which is over $1 trillion, they focused on two federal agencies that have this formula grant program. One is the Department of Education, and the other is the Department of Justice. And buried within the multi-billion dollars that the Department of Education allocated for this last cycle of federal funding was about $90 million for a school security program. And this $90 million is called Safe Schools, and this Safe Schools program is relatively new. The problem with the $90 million is you can see that it doesn't go very far because it's only $90 million. But if it's security, it competes among other top priorities within the federal government for other programs like mental health or counseling and so on. So in the Department of Education, we are advocating, meaning the ESA and SIA, that in this cycle, in this round of congressional funding for the federal government, they allocate another $90 million for school security. But the most important is that we want to urge the Department of Education to base these grants on competition and to provide for specific acquisition for security equipment based on individual school, and this could be a whole range of security measures. Could provide for installation and purchase, maintenance, video surveillance systems, door and window security systems, including panic bars, security alarms, monitoring, and so forth. One of the key projects that we are undertaking is to visit the Department of Education with the Security Industry Association, and this we will do. In fact, we're going to set up a meeting during the day on Capitol Hill with officials at the Department of Education to review the kinds of new security technologies that would be available to the different school districts. At the same time, and of course this is not something that we are advocating nationwide, but there has been in the last 12 months reported both within SIA and their school security initiative, and reported within our government relations committee within ESA, a whole host of state-funded security upgrades around the country. And most recently, we reported at the last GR committee meeting during our board meeting at the beginning of the year. For example, we have North Dakota allocated $3 million for each school district to improve security equipment. In little state of Delaware, $5 million. Indiana received a very gracious grant from the industry for $500,000 to upgrade their security systems. I believe Stanley was the one that did that. And in New Jersey, we found one city alone that after the Sandy Hook elementary event, the school system installed $2 million worth of security upgrades with more than 800 cameras in every classroom and corridor. In Washington State, a little tiny school board called Grandview allocated $250,000. I was interested in our local Maryland, Montgomery County, which is one of the counties right next to Washington, D.C., just passed about 3 months ago a 6-year, $9 million capital improvement program aimed specifically in security infrastructure, closed-circuit TV, and so on for their schools. And Prince George's County, which is one of our neighboring counties here in D.C., invested $7.5 million on electronic systems. In our Electronic Security Association, in the last year, I also was very interested and have networked this with some of our friends in the Louisiana delegation. In just one district in Louisiana in 2013, there was hundreds of thousands of dollars, almost $250,000 in one school district. So the point here is that both at the state, especially at the state level, there is great interest in, obviously, in school security, but there is no other associations with greater knowledge and experience in the types of security technologies to help elementary and secondary schools with their security equipment. So when you say, what are we asking for in this in this visit to Congress, I think the congressmen, senators, and staff will be extremely interested in the fact of our expertise and the fact that ESA, for example, has, and there will be a link to this in our handout, has a electronic security guidelines for schools, which was developed last summer, June in 2013, a 30-page document which that the congressman would be more than willing to send to all their schools in their district, and of course equal amount of information from SIA. So we have a very good issue here, and I think there will be a receptiveness on the part of Congress. What we're asking for is a return of this $90 million for another year at the Department of Education. Within the Department of Justice, there was allocated $75 million for a comprehensive school safety initiative. At $75 million also on a formula grant basis. So as a marketing initiative for ESA, these grant programs, if they're competitive, is a forward-looking view of monies that can be available and of course, for those members who normally market to school districts and schools, this is just additional funding made available through the process. And for our attendees who want to ask more questions about this process, I certainly can answer those. Next slide. For about 5 or 6 years, we have sought to access the FBI's FBI's criminal database for background checks for those states who do not have licensing of our industry, which are 27, by the way, and for the purposes of making sure that if a felon goes from one state to another, that their background is checked for employment, providing access to people's residences and commercial establishments. Now, over the years, since the 1930s, Congress is the one institution that must pass a law permitting a non-governmental authority or a non-law enforcement authority or a industry access to this FBI database. And there are many different organizations that have sought permission from Congress over the years, whether they be banks, whether they be gambling, wagering, horse racing, nuclear facilities, flight training schools, nursing homes. There is just a list of 21 organizations that have achieved this purpose. The most recent was 10 years ago. The private security guard community took 6 years, or at least 6 years, to pass their bill permitting access to the FBI database. Now we have 27 states, 27 states that do not have licensing. The other states have access to the FBI database. In order for Congress to permit this, we have 2 bills. One is H.R. 1441, introduced by Congressman Lukemeyer, who is from Missouri, and S. 1362 by Senator Schumer from New York. These bills have been reintroduced each Congress. They are before the House and Senate Judiciary Committee. They define the electronic security industry. They permit those members of the industry through their states excuse me, to access the FBI database. But the most important is that the bill authorizes negotiation with the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, to issue regulations on just how that access will be permitted. The problems with background checks bills are very, very prevalent this year. Many of you know that there's been efforts by the anti-gun community to target background check bills as they apply to guns, which has nothing to do with our issue. And there's some other issues that relate to people who have served time in prison, also have nothing to do with our bill. So there's a reluctance on the part of Congress to introduce these bills and pass them, despite the fact that there's no opposition, because they could become vehicles for other issues to be attached to. The end game in this particular is to urge Congress to permit the Electronic Security Association to access the FBI criminal database, and that will be one of our top priorities going forward. We have in our packet we have a listing of the states that would be directly impacted by permitting the 27 states, by permitting them to access the FBI database. We have a letter of support from the Security Industry Association, and we have a letter of support from the National Association of State Fire Marshals, which is all part of the document, as well as some examples, redacted, of course, without naming different companies or individuals, examples of technicians or industry problems in various employees being arrested for accessing people's homes, which can be avoided. Okay, next slide. This is another issue that relates to potential marketing, but it's also an issue that strikes at home to a lot of us. In that the last 2 years, we've seen a whole host of states pass legislation and even consider legislation that would permit the installation, installation of video surveillance equipment voluntarily by the guardians or families of patients who are in nursing homes. In the last, I would say, 2 years, we've seen bills passed in Oklahoma and in Virginia last year. These are state bills. And we have seen bills introduced and debated in Rhode Island, New Jersey, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Maryland, Michigan, Mississippi, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. This is a new issue. However, I've been told in some hospitals and, of course, in daycare facilities and in other places of protection that this is a very important issue. It relates to liability. It also relates to preventing elder abuse. So what we have here is we have 2 states, actually 4, that have statutes. Texas and New Mexico are in addition to Oklahoma and Virginia. We have 4 states with statutes, many states undertaking this, and we have a very, very large, it's over 1,000 pages, Older Americans Act bill that's going through the process within the Congress. It has to be passed every 4 or 5 years, and this is the year that they're considering it. So this year, this bill, this 1,000-page bill called the Older Americans Reauthorization Act, has a provision in there that relates to elder abuse prevention. And I think it is incumbent on the industry to have the Congress consider directing that these federal agencies that have oversight of nursing homes in the United States, Health and Human Services, and it's called CMMS, the Center for Medicaid Services, to initiate, again, a state grant pilot program to provide funding for those states willing to purchase, install, maintain surveillance equipment voluntarily in patients' rooms, and to evaluate whether these equipment can be put into nursing homes voluntarily as needed through federal regulations. We're also recommending a public hearing. We have potential witnesses of people that have contacted me over the years. One lady in Missouri comes to mind whose husband was abused in a nursing home, and she has made it a cause célèbre to support this kind of project. So this is what we're requesting here is something that is the beginning of an initiative, and I'll be going through this in more detail when the attendees come in on Monday. Next slide. Our final issue is a long-standing position paper approved by the Electronic Security Association, in which we are the only association in the industry advocating a balanced approach relating to suppression and detection, especially on a federal level. Now, our position paper, you can see at the top there, it says fire detection plus fire suppression equals fire protection. There is a very, very large fire-related community here in Washington, fire chiefs and firemen and anyone associated with the fire community, and indeed we will have joining with us the fire marshals nationally. And this particular community is very much influenced by the National Fire Sprinkler Association, which advocates suppression only as a means to have fire protection and fire safety. We have found in the past, actually the past 5 or 6 years, that one of their top priorities is the introduction of legislation to permit building owners to install fire sprinkler retrofits and to receive a 15-year depreciable property, allowing tax benefits that would be in the millions of dollars. This happens to be a Senate bill. It is a Fire Sprinkler Incentive Act. I mean, it's very nice. I mean, it's a very nice bill. Senator Carper is from Delaware. He's chairman of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. He's the sponsor. We have no problem with suppression only, except if Congress is going to allocate these kind of benefits to the suppression community, they need to also include life safety, fire alarm detection systems, which would include detection in addition to suppression. We have some proposed amendments to his bill, and we want to advocate for this balanced approach in the Congress, especially since most members and most staff people do not know the difference between suppression and detection systems, and certainly are not nuanced in the type of appliances and systems that we have from our industry. Next, and that's up to you, Josh.
Okay, thank you, John. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and begin the Q&A. Please remember to send any questions that you have through the question log, and we'll get through those. I've already had a few come in, so John and Lynn, 2 questions regarding the background check House and Senate bills. One, do we ask congressmen and senators to co-sponsor these?
Well, the Congress for this session ends at the end of the year. That begins a new Congress in January, and all the bills that are introduced for this Congress die. So they all end at the end of this year. Ordinarily, I would say ask them to co-sponsor, but in this case, that is not a key priority, and that's not a requirement for what we are advocating. We want, since there is no opposition, we want the essence of these bills to permit us to go to the Justice Department and secure access to these databases. We want that language in any bill that would pass this session of Congress.
Okay, great, and thanks. In regards to these bills as well, you briefly touched on this, but can you elaborate on the arguments as to why Congress does not want to pass them?
In the past, and I assume that you're talking about the federal background check.
That's correct.
Legislation. In the past, background checks have been embroiled with other issues that have nothing to do with our issue. And there's a fear on the part of the leadership, both in the Senate and in the House, that if they bring a bill up that has anything to do with background checks, it will create a vehicle by which anti-gun officials will advocate amendments, which happened, incidentally, with Senator Boxer. She brought a bill up, and it was defeated in the House. So due to the contention between the House, which is Republican-controlled, and the Senate, which is Democratic-controlled, anything that has to do with background checks will cause other issues unrelated to ours to come up, number one. Number two, in the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, there's been a huge issue that has arisen in the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, all around the country and nationally through this EEOC, in which background checks by employers would in some ways prejudice those individuals that have served in prison. And again, that's not our issue, but that also is an inhibiting factor in Congress considering these bills.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. Another question, do you have any insight for smaller corporations and how they can compete for school security state grants? And what is ESA's position on that?
Well, our position is very clear. Traditionally, grants to large school districts, New York or Los Angeles or some of the largest cities, large populations, a large company would have certainly an advantage in submitting those kind of grants, grant proposals to those kind of school districts. Therefore, in the presentation that we're making, especially to the Department of Education and Department of Justice, which proposes and administers these grant programs, that there be competition for the grants and that small businesses can compete on a level playing field with larger companies as well. So there are opportunities, and that's something that can be articulated. A lot of these school districts obviously are very local, and a lot of the members of ESA know the schools, elementary and secondary schools in their area. They've gone to them. They have family. They have neighbors that go there that are on the school boards. So it's a little bit of a lobbying exercise to determine pricing and availability of equipment on a competitive basis. And that is something that we want to talk to the federal government about. And it's something that maybe the states want to talk about as well.
Okay. All right, thank you again. How about again, you briefly touched on this, but if there are non-industry issues or issues that we didn't discuss today, will we have the opportunity to bring those up?
Certainly. Again, in the remarks that I made in the beginning relating to time, time is the enemy. And so if there's a meeting that's scheduled and the congressman serves on a committee of jurisdiction that relates to one of these 4 issues, we will identify that to the attendees when they arrive. We will review that. Congressmen and senators are always interested in constituent positions. So we're not going to tell somebody not to bring up something, but these are the top priorities that we would like brought up. And if there's time, certainly other issues can be brought up. I would suggest that if there's a rapport with a congressman or senator based on the meeting and a follow-up, that other issues certainly can be brought up at a later time.
This is Lynn. It would be very wise for you to come prepared. If you have, I'll call them topics and off topics, if they're not related to this, but we have such a wide variety of issues, political hot buttons, if you will, come prepared with 2 or 3 that are very meaningful to you, because it is not uncommon for the legislator or his assistants to ask you, come right out and ask you what's on your mind, these days as far as some of the ongoing issues. So if you come prepared, then you already have your own talking points that are off topic to the ones that ESA will be presenting.
All right, thanks, Lynn. That's a great segue into my next question. So in addition to a copy of this PowerPoint, which will be accessible at the end of the webinar, what materials will attendees be receiving on site? Talking point schedule?
Well, prior to coming to Washington, I was informed this afternoon that on the web, on the ESA web, and also all attendees will receive by email detailed legislative position papers and talking points that will be given also out at the arrival registration and briefing times. In addition, there'll be materials given out at the registration that will further discuss these issues, and of course I'm available anytime to review anything that I brought up here as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I do have 2 last questions. Can you please advise on the best way to follow up with the congressional office staff, or does the district office have an impact on policy?
Okay. In the meeting, 99.9% of the staff will give a card to the person in charge of the delegation or to everybody in the delegation that is attending. This card will have the person's email and address. I would strongly recommend a follow-up email as opposed to a letter, thanking the staff person for meeting with them, if the member is there, or the senator, thanking the senator on the member, and copying my office so that we can follow up as well. Now, there will be a debriefing after all of this is over back at the hotel, where I'll be and taking notes, receiving your comments. But the best way to follow up is right after you get back home. You follow up with a very nice thank you and reiterating some points. Maybe they wanted you to provide some information locally of impact, of how you impact the district. For those of you who really would like to take advantage of networking and getting to know these members, which I highly recommend, setting up a visit to your facility is one way to get to know the member, introducing them to your employees and your family. The other way is to go into the district office and to meet, which I would be happy to prepare any attendee to do on any of our issues that are important. So it could also be, by the way, that somebody who's running for Congress in a district where the member is retiring. And that is something that I advocate right after the election. Whoever is elected from November 4th, the next day, November 5th to January, is to introduce yourself and to discuss these issues for the next session, which will begin in January.
Okay, thank you, John. It looks like that will be wrapping up Q&A.
Okay. If there are no more questions, I'd like to remind everyone that there is a recording of this webinar available to you in the Members Only Resource section at esaweb.org. Once again, I'd like to thank John for the very informative content as well as Telgard and Triad for sponsoring today's webinar. We appreciate your time and hope you found the session useful, and we'll see you at Capitol Hill next week. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.